Director Barb Sylvester, Law Director Justin Richard, Economic Development Director David Maley, and Code Enforcement Officer Jimmy Johnson. Mr. Edmund Mack was here. Is he coming back? No. Okay. Thank you. That's it. President Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you. And let the record show that all 9 members of council and plus the president of council are present this evening. We will get started. Community development.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I have a few items that fall under old business. Ordinance number 99-2022. We are going to have a public hearing next Monday, August 15th at 6 p.m. This is the rezoning request of Menards from B3 General Business to I-1 Light Industrial. Purpose is to allow for self-storage facility. So that is old business, our first old business. So it was tabled, and we will make a motion to bring this forward for a vote after the public hearing. The second item is resolution number 10-2022. The request is to reverse the decision of the Massillon Board of Zoning Appeals in the variance case number 2022-8. We heard from the applicant Jason Walsh last week at the council meeting regarding his desire to build a new 2-story with a loft, a single-family dwelling on Woodruff Avenue, which is parcel number 603098. There has been no one present up to this point because we did receive letters to support reversing this decision, but we have not seen any individuals present up to this point to speak publicly at our hearings. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak on resolution number 10-2022 regarding the vacant lot parcel 603098 at Woodruff Avenue? Did we request, I don't believe, did we get all the information we needed from administration? I think, Julie, you had a question. Did you get everything answered? Okay. So this will be up for second reading at Monday's, at the next council meeting. Under new business, it is a resolution accepting Type 1 annexation petition, annexation of 0.530 acres located in the southwest border of Section 16, Perry Township, Stark County, Ohio. We did receive information, documentation from the Stark County Commissioners approving the vote 3-0. Is there anyone, administration, that would like to come and address this request? I believe we did receive, we did vote and approve, let me get my documentation, back in November. I think it's Augusta Lakes. There are 3 parcels that were in Perry Township wanting to be annexed into the city of Massillon. Anyone from administration that would like to come and address this request? Mr. David, just to confirm that I am speaking correctly regarding these 3 parcels that were in Perry Township.
Exactly.
That Steve Smith wanted to be annexed.
That's correct, for his development.
Into his first development in Augusta Lakes.
Yeah,
so, based on the documents that we received from Stark County Commissioners, it's now officially completed, other than our acceptance
that is correct.
of this annexation.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, that's Mr. Lewis.
I just want to go back to the first one.
Okay, that was the rezoning of Menards property.
And just because next week I'll be running the meeting, so I might not have ample opportunity to speak. I just say with a lot of the question that's been coming, and thank you, Ms. Kramer, for your leadership in that question not that I'm taking a concrete way of one way or another, but I am starting to lean towards not necessarily being in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I will state my concerns again to this council. I do not see benefit any advantage to having additional storage units, especially its primary real estate. My concern is any other business that would like to come into that area. You know, now we have to take into consideration, do they want to be near a storage unit? It's a concern of mine, and I've been very vocal regarding this parcel and the rezoning request. Mr. Perry?
Thank you, Stuart. I got to agree. We've got these things popping up around town like popcorn. Are we saturated yet?
I believe I asked administration the number of storage units that we have in the city, and I want to say it's less than 10, but it's creeping up near 10. Is it 8 or 9? Mr. Manning?
I don't have an exact figure, to be honest with you, but it's probably around 8, and there are some that are right on the outskirts of the city too. There are a number of them that are right outside city limits also, storage units.
And I know there is a storage unit right on Nave Road, which is across Route 30, right in that vicinity also. So we're going to have, you know, multiple storage units viewable by those individuals traveling on Route 30. Mr. Hurricane?
Thank you. I'll jump in here too. I'm opposed to the rezoning, and I think we have too many, or at least enough storage units in the city as we have. So I'll be a no vote on Monday, definitively.
Mr. Lewis?
I think one of the big issues for me as well is, while there is a one-time improvement to the city, because obviously while the building's getting built, there's a little bit of revenue from that, but once it's built, there's no jobs created, there's no economic development there, it just becomes a building that has stuff. And I think most Massillonians could see that 2130 corridor as being a potential area for economic development for our city. Why would we want to take that land and basically make it a little dark spot? So.
Anyone else? Mr. Craig?
I haven't personally decided how I'm going to vote on this, but I'll play devil's advocate for a second. As far as your comment, Mr. Lewis, about not generating income, that is a business that's going to generate, hopefully, profit, and that would be taxable. It's also, I'm wondering, is it up to us to decide how a property owner wants to use the property? And I know, obviously, that's part of our job is in determining zoning, but I would think that this individual, this isn't his first, I believe, if I recall, it's not his first rental property, or not rental property, but storage unit business. I would think he had done some market research to see if he thought it would be a viable business. And if he thought the market was already saturated with storage units, I would think that he'd take that into consideration. That's just some things to consider. As I said, I haven't decided for sure how I'm going to vote. Thank you.
Mr. Lombardi?
Thank you, Mrs. Grigg. I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Grigg. I'm kind of on the fence with this myself, but I do believe that this is a revenue-producing business, and I do believe that I agree with the statement that should we be deciding what businesses can develop on a property. I mean, it's not like it's city property, and the revenue stream that does get created from just their profit alone, could benefit the city. However, I also agree with Mr. Lewis. There's not going to be many employees paying, that are going to be generating any type of income tax either.
Okay, thank you. That's all about community development.
Economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. There's one new legislation request tonight. It's an economic development inducement grant for Crackpots Comedy Club, located at 14 Lincoln West, downtown. The owner, Chris Kettler, is requesting funds for costs incurred for initial build-out, equipment, etc., in the amount of $6,000. Mr. Maley, do you have any other information you'd like to share on this? And is Mr. Kettler present?
Mr. Chairman, this is for the comedy club at the Climax Building, Crackpots. Mr. Chris Kettler, he is here tonight, had requested funding for that. I passed around a score sheet where recommending $6,000 for the funding. Mr. Kettler has been open for some time. It's a little unusual, but he has an unusual situation being the only comedy club here in Stark County. And I think it's been a benefit to our downtown and to our city, drawing a different clientele into Massillon. So we would recommend funding for this for him, for the project.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kettler, would you like to say a few words? You come up to the microphone here, state your name and address, and tell us a little bit about what you intend to use the funds for.
Excuse me. Good afternoon. I'm Chris Kettler. I occupy 14 Lincoln Way here in Massillon. I reside in Wayne County, though. Hope that doesn't really make a big difference. The intent is, if I could recoup some of my operating up costs, that I could do several other things inside the business that would also encourage more people to come to the area. So some of the things we're looking to do is to install a recording system where comedians can just plug in a flash drive and be able to download their audio and video in a high quality standard onto a flash drive. And what that does is then they share that information with other people in the industry, and that again highlights Massillon, Ohio, because that's where the comedy club is. One of the biggest things on my agenda for the coming year, though, is the comedy festival. I've spoken with a couple of the other business owners down in the community. I don't know if you're familiar with the festival concept, but it'd be something I'd be happy to share in detail with any of you. But have plans to do a large-scale comedy festival that would attract people from literally around the world to Massillon, Ohio, for a 3 or 4 day event at multiple businesses downtown. So, and that being reimbursed, that would help me go further in that direction. So, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions from the committee members? Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. Kate. Mr. Kettler, you've been open for a short while now. How's business going?
Business today is, I think, everybody is about the same. You know, we have good times and we have bad times. My business is a very seasonal business. We are not in our season right now. So the summer is the off season for comedy because there's other toys, there's motorcycles, cars, outside football games, baseball games, things to do, walk the dog, play with the grandkids. People don't want to come sit inside during the summer. So making it through these months has really proven that we have what it takes to get through. Okay, we've been open a year and 3 weeks, I think, as of tomorrow, Wednesday. So I'm very confident in what we're doing. The fall, winter, and the early part of the spring months were fantastic and fabulous with us. We were able to bring a great number of incredibly talented people from literally, again, around the world to right here. We've had comedians come from continent of Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Canada, and coast to coast. Some of them have been in major motion pictures on TV, et cetera, et cetera. So we're very, very thrilled to be able to continue doing what we're doing.
How do you market and advertise?
We're started out very slow with the marketing and advertising, and again, I took that into consideration because of the climate that we're in. Staffing is still a challenge, and then of course attracting people to go out is harder than ever in this day and age. So I worked basically from the start at just word of mouth, social media, but since then we are now on radio. We're on 3 radio stations. We have what we use is what's called a search engine optimization, that's SEO. So the idea behind that, most people these days will Google what they're looking for the weekend event. So we use keywords through an SEO program, and that's pretty much our major drive. We're looking at some billboards and such, but you know, this day and age, how do you advertise? That's the burning question everybody has. We get out into the community, try to handbill, try to be, I send out a lot of emails to businesses, Chamber of Commerce's, and stuff like that. So a lot of direct contact, shaking hands and kissing babies kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Councilwoman Harbert-Smith.
Yes, I just have two questions for you. One is, how many employees do you currently employ? And the second is there anything as far as that's obstructing your business, such as parking, things like that?
You know, parking is something I'm going to address the second one first, and I apologize for taking them out of order. Parking is something that has been, from the day that I conceived the idea of this here in Mass, and people have said, oh, what about the parking? You know? And you know what? I'm sorry, but I'm a business that's open after 6 p.m. There is no problem with parking, okay? And we make that, we try to promote that, as well as many other aspects of Massillon in our marketing and promotion, that it's a safe city, you know? It's ranked as one of the safest cities. We promote that a lot, as well as ample, well-lit parking that's available throughout the downtown area. I can tell you exactly how many feet they are from my door because I've walked them, you know. The municipal lot that has multiple layers, there's a lot right behind us, caddy corner on every corner, we've got lots. So that's really not an issue. The other question you inquired about, at this time we have a staff of, again, we're in the off-season, I think it is 7 people is the number I have. But that will increase as we go in, once school starts up and such, we'll do very well.
Mr. Sneed.
Thank you, Mr. Herndon. By no means am I trying to throw a wrench into this at all, and I've been to your club, I respect it, and I do appreciate it. I'm just kind of curious if you can elaborate a little bit more on why we're trying to expedite the grant. Why it's considered emergency language, just to expedite the grant. I don't quite understand that.
That's something the chairman, Mr. Hernkane, had suggested we maybe expedite grants. I know at one point we're not doing emergency measures, but at some point we decided to just move stuff forward.
I told Mr. Maley when we started this committee, and I chaired it, because I noticed that emergency language wasn't marked on the legislation request. I asked Dave what the history was. I guess it was marked. Historically, it was taken off. I have no problem with it being considered, or at least marked as emergency language on some of these things. So
I have no problem with whatever the committee or the chair, or whatever you guys would like to do. I'm fine with it.
I have no comment in the matter, Mr. Sneed.
Okay. I just wanted to be fair.
I understand. No, I think that would be something for the council to discuss and determine how that would best be handled, okay?
Thank you. Yep, I just didn't know if I wanted to have a few words on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
any other questions? Yes, Ms. Roll.
Do they serve food?
Yeah, we have a great menu. It's handcrafted food that's affordably priced, which is another great feature. Again, I've taken into consideration where we're located. This is a working class community, okay? This is the way I see a majority of the individuals here. So we're asking most people on Friday and Saturday nights to pay $15 or more to come just walk it through the door. So in order to be affordable and what do I want to say, respectful to the community, the working people, you know, we've kept our food prices very affordable. Nothing on our menu is priced over $12.99. And we have appetizer salads, sandwiches, dinners, desserts, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we make as much of it from scratch homemade each day as we can. Obviously, we don't make homemade fried cheese sticks, but just doesn't make sense. But we do try real hard to make good food at an affordable price. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kettler. Thank you, Mr. Maley. I'll sign this and we'll put this, pass it around, put this on the agenda for first reading on Monday.
Public Welfare Building,
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Parks and Rec,
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Police and Fire,
Nothing for police and fire, Mr. Lewis.
Public Utilities,
Nothing from public utilities, thank you.
Rules and Courts.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I have a new request for legislation. Please prepare legislation to amend Rule 28.1 and Rule 28.2 of the Rules of Council as follows. Rule 28.1, all non-committee sponsored ordinances or resolutions appearing on the agenda for council action shall be given first reading only, and unless otherwise ordered by council, be referred by the presiding officer to the appropriate committee, which shall report on the same with or without amendment as the committee may deem best at the next regularly scheduled meeting of council from the time of first reading. Rule 28.2, a non-committee sponsored ordinance or resolution may only be placed on the agenda for second reading, third reading, and passage by leave of a majority vote of the elected members of council, and only after the first regularly scheduled meeting of council from the time of first reading. So seeing as Mr. Hernke brought this legislation forward, I'll let you describe it and explain it.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I feel bad you had to read all that when the actual changes are very slight. How this is different from the way it currently is in our rules of council, if you look at the last line of each item, if you look at 28.1, the change is at the next instead of on or before the second. The change in 28.2 in the last line, third word, instead of is first instead of second. I've talked to Mr. Bartos a couple times about this in the past to pick his brain, and he couldn't see any logical reason why the current language basically skips a regular meeting of council. The way that it's worded says on or before the second regular meeting or only after the second meeting in terms of when we can vote to give a matter that is non-committee sponsored legislation first read and then votes for a second read. So I just never saw the logic in why the original language skipped a week and made it wait 30 days before council had a vote to give a matter in that instance second read. So that was the impetus for the change to make it treated as every other piece of legislation and do it in a more timely manner.
Thank you. Discussion? Questions, Mr. Lewis?
My initial thoughts on this is that the reason that the meetings in between would exist is to preserve the integrity of the committee. The idea behind this is that this is legislation that either was never presented to a committee or was presented to a committee and the committee was not in favor of it. So this is a way for members of council that do not sit on that committee to be able to still get something in front of council. So the idea of putting this time frame in there is to slow it down for careful deliberation and also to keep the integrity of that committee. If we start taking measures that shorten or diminish the community's standing, then you start to diminish the point of committees. And the reason that we have committees is that we're all here to focus in on a specific area and make recommendations to council. So really 30 days is not unreasonable for something that is not even sponsored by the committee itself. So I don't see why we would have to make that adjustment just so we can speed things up because you don't like how a committee is feeling on a particular topic.
Mr. Sterritt?
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Boy, we spend so much time, I hate to use the word waste, we spend a lot of time, so many times, beating a dead horse. And then when we see an opportunity to maybe have some impetus to move things forward, there's a block. I think it's a good idea. I think a lot of things should be, unless it's absolutely necessary, and I mean absolutely necessary for reasons of a public hearing or something like that, to drag them out for months months and months at a time, as we've done in so many instances. I don't see any reason not to pass this. And it's, at best, what's it slow down 2 weeks? Or skip 2 weeks? I mean, come on, thanks.
Mr. Hearn?
Thank you, Mr. Craig. To Mr. Lewis's point, the problem I have with what he said is that there actually is no deliberation in the interim in a case like this. If you look at the current pending piece of non-committee sponsored legislation we have that was written by Mr. Slutz and Mr. Garrett, that was given first read a couple weeks ago. We haven't talked about it since. So there is no deliberation within that 30 days. It's just it's like a black hole. It just nothing happens. So the rationale is to not have that happen because we're not talking about it. We didn't talk about it in the last work session. Probably not. We may talk about it tonight. I don't know. But the point is, I don't see the logic in skipping a week.
Mr. Lewis?
The lack of deliberation is the same as deliberation in the sense that that committee has decided to not take it up any further. So just because a committee disagrees with a particular issue that you're bringing up and chooses not to speak on it during their committee meeting doesn't mean that, oh, we better speak this up. So again, it comes down to an emotional thing. We don't like how a committee is handling things, so therefore we're going to come and try to shorten the window that they're allowed to do it. When, quite honestly, sometimes, and I'm trying not to get to the particular one that is in place here, but sometimes issues aren't even brought to the committee to consider in the first place. I mean, if we're going to start shortening things, then now we have legislation that's being written, presented to council, never even given to the committee to consider, and we're already going through a backdoor process that now we want to shorten. You have completely upset the balance of what committees are for by doing this, and you're trying to make it quicker and quicker. And that is why I would be opposed to that. I mean, when you do a non-committee sponsored thing, so a typical piece of legislation has to come to a work session like tonight. And then it has to go to the regular meeting, and it can get up to 3 readings. If you do a non-committee sponsored, it skips tonight altogether, goes straight to first reading before anybody's even seen it or discussed it. And then it has written in, as we currently have, there's going to be a few weeks off for potential discussion or not, and then it comes back. The way you're proposing it is you skip the first work session, go straight to the first meeting, get first reading right off the rip, and then 2 weeks later you're going to be right up going and get second reading. All you've done, you've actually made it so that non-committee sponsored legislation will move faster than committee sponsored, or almost as fast. Right? I mean, because at the first meeting, you would get first reading, and at the next council meeting, we're voting to see if it goes to second reading. It's on the same pace as the committee-sponsored legislation. You have completely disrespected and disregarded the wishes of any committee and not allowed them to have any kind of say. You just said that committee doesn't matter, other council members want to push it through. That's why there's a break in the middle to draw it out.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I'm a fan of Rule 28. I don't think that it is devious or underhanded or trying to undercut any committees. Any member of council can draft legislation requests and send it to any committee. I also believe that any 2 members of council that aren't on a committee that have an idea can put forth something on their own accord. I don't think that this rule is intended to be or has been used in any underhanded fashion to skirt any type of process that is in place. I think it's another tool for any council member or 2 that have an idea that they want to put forth to utilize. So, Mr. Lewis and I obviously disagree on the merits of the rule. We're coming from 2 different places on what we think it means. I think it's going to mean to each individual council person what it means to them. They can decide for themselves if they think it's a positive tool for members of council to use, or if they feel it's a way to, go around an established committee arrangement. But this is something that has, we've used this rule a couple times over the last few years. I put this forward because I believe that if you see something that is of question or you don't like, do something about it. I happen to think this is odd, that it has to skip a week, and that's why I put it forward.
Hey, Mr. Herndon, I'll get you just a second. My thoughts on this are, we mentioned that why treat this type of legislation any different than other legislation? And the fact is, it is different. It's not being sponsored by the committee. It's being handled differently. I think it's a good idea to have the two types of processes in place. I don't see a need to change the existing one. I think that you mentioned, Mr. Thayer, slowing things way down. This really doesn't slow it down. It just gives us an opportunity to give it more thought ahead of time by the committee that should be handling it. And then, once it's into that process, then it moves as fast as any other piece of legislation does, or can, or goes as slow as any other piece of legislation can. But I think it makes sense to have a separate process for this type of legislation so that we do keep the integrity of the committees intact. With that, Mr. Thayer.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. And I'm not at all arguing that committees do their committee work and committees can do their thing. But in the same vein, we press each other, we're pressed by the community to bring ideas, to have discussions, to bring forth propositions here in council. And how do I say this? I don't want someone to be dissuaded or hesitant to bring forth an idea because their committee might not be in favor of it. Maybe the committee didn't think of it. Here's a presentation. Let the committee take it. Okay? There are ideas out there that maybe one or two of us don't have and somebody else has. Why can't we honor that and put it in the process and let it run? Instead of, oh, we'll just stick this one back on a shelf like everything else. I don't know. I don't think there's any reason to have things slow down so much. Sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I'm inclined to agree with you and Mr. Lewis. I don't think the current rule dissuades anybody from bringing anything forward. I've used it myself, along with Mr. Herndon, to bring legislation to this council, and we've done it effectively. And I have to agree with what Mr. Lewis says. When we do this, the first discussion goes right to first reading. And because nobody really knows what's going on in the committee, there's really not that much discussion. So now we go into second reading, and before we can go to second reading, we have to vote to put it into second reading. So I think that the delay in between, and it's only one council meeting, but that delay in between, I think, is necessary so the committee can get their bearings on it, understand why the sponsees of the legislation brought it forward, and that discussion can then go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Marty. Mr. Lewis.
I just want to also point out that if the way that I'm understanding this is written, if it's going essentially at the same pace as committee sponsored, then there'd be no reason for a member of council to ever take anything to committee. There'd be no, why would you? It's going to be just as fast as to put it right on the agenda. You're just going to do non-committee sponsored, get your first reading, and 2 weeks later you're going to get your second reading. It's going to move just as quickly. You can either bring it up at the committee meeting and hope that they sign and put it on, or not. There's no benefit to going to the committee first. So for council people, just avoid it altogether. Just do non-committee every time you have something you want to bring up. And that's essentially what this would do. And that's yet another reason why there's a gap to encourage people to go to the committees first. There's a reason we select committees, and that's because we are trusting members within ourselves to discuss and make decisions. And when that committee fails to do that, then we have an avenue that allows the rest of council to speak up and basically say, hey, that committee has not done what we needed to do, or whatever. We move on.
discussion? Okay, I'm inclined not to sign this for placing on the agenda, but I have 2 other committee members that can do that if they wish, so that's where we're at with this. Thank you. That's all I have.
Student comments?
Nothing, Louis.
All right, finance. First thing you have here is there's 3 pieces I want to kind of discuss at the same time. They're all $60,000. One to transfer out, then to transfer in, and then into servicing the contract. So that's so that we can move money into a line item for the economic development, such as the grant that we were discussing earlier about crackpots. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Bailey is here. Ms. Bailey, do you have anything you want to bring up about it?
Mr. Chairman, basically it's just to give some funding for inducement grants. It would cover, obviously, the one tonight. I have a couple, I think 3 pending. And I can't tell you, because you don't really know how many are going to come in and how much you're going to be for, but I mean, the money will waste it. It's just a matter of appropriating. And that way we don't have to go through this every, this previous legislation every couple of weeks or whatever.
This was a practice we started doing a little over a year, maybe 2 years ago. We used to have to appropriate every inducement grant that would come through economic development, and now we just do lump sums. That way, as soon as economic development gets something through, they can carry on. Ms. Green?
Is this the second request for funding, or is this the third request for funding this year?
This is the second.
Not including the budgeted amount.
Well, yeah, I don't
Let's
actually.
talk about where we're at with this. If this is the second request, we had our initial request a couple months ago, which was the same dollar
No,
amount.
I think it was actually last year that we requested this, because I've only spent $40,000 this year in inducement grants. So the money carries over, and so I just kind of spend it, and then when I need more money.
So this year, you've only spent $40,000.
$40,500 in grants.
So we must have approved additional funding late last
Late
year.
last year was it.
Having difficulty remembering.
No, so it's the same amount.
It was the same amount you're exactly correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I have signed these and put them on the agenda. The next one is please appropriate the unappropriated balance from the Community Health Services Fund, $26,000. And these are funds from COVID-19 grant workforce, and this is for the health department to cover their costs for nursing employee wages. Do we have someone here that would like to be able to speak to this? I'm sure there are questions. Does anyone from finance have any questions? I'll go ahead and give the floor to Mr. Lombardi first.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I'd just like to know exactly what we're using this for.
Good evening. Yes, this is the grant money that basically right now is in the revenue account. It is already in the 1235 account. It is a grant that has been approved and it's there. So now they are appropriating it into the expense account. So it does get used for exactly what the grant was given to the city for and accepted by the city for wages overtime as it has listed on here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else in finance? Ms. Green.
Yes, regarding nursing OT, did we discontinue COVID tracing last year? I mean, I guess I'm trying to get a better understanding of what the nursing overtime, how we're justifying overtime if we discontinued COVID tracing.
I don't know that answer. As far as the tracing, I know they do have to still report everything to the state, but as far as the tracing process, exactly how that's going, where before, I know they traced, exposures and so forth, but to have the exact details, I'd have to get that for you from the health department. So I know they do have to do all of the reporting, of course, because it is a grant from the state health department. So I do know that there is record keeping that they have to do, but if you want the exact process of what they're doing.
Yeah, so are they doing testing, COVID testing at the health department? Because usually healthcare facilities have to report their positive cases directly to the health department. So are they doing testing here in our health department that they have to be reporting?
Again, I don't want to answer that for sure because I don't know.
Okay, yeah,
I know there's a lot of record keeping and
Right.
reporting that they have to do, not only for the grants, but for the health department to be able to release their numbers as well. But to give you the exact details on it, I'd rather have it come from them.
Yeah, just to give us a little
Okay.
better understanding of what
Sure.
they're doing.
I'll let you know, and I'll let you know exactly, what they do report
Okay.
to the state then.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Ms. Harwood-Smith?
Yes, can you tell me, we added staffing last year. What was our staffing before COVID and what is our staffing now? Do you know that? And I'm just like, when I looked at the numbers, I don't know if it was last month or before, and they were showing us the number of like how many shots and stuff they did, and it wasn't that much. And I'm just wondering,
I see that they didn't have a large increase in the number of employees. If you recall, the city approved the grant that for part-time people through it. That grant was through June of 2023, so it was basically part-time positions. So I do know that they did fill one of those positions, but I don't know that they filled the second one. So it's not been a large number of employees, no. But I can get you the numbers.
yeah,
I'll tell you exactly what they have now,
just curious,
and then prior to COVID.
what they're doing all day.
Yeah, there's still some, probably about eight or nine employees there. But I'll get you the exact number and
Okay.
numbers prior.
I mean, it just may be something we need to look at again. Just-
Okay.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to the next one. The next one is for please prepare an ordinance for the unappropriated balance of general fund for the sum of $750 for the sponsorship program. This is needed for the printing of the memorial banners. And again, this is just money that we are passed through for people are contributing for the banners. Any questions? Next one is to service and contracts for our summer concert series. It's $9,166. Again, this is they raise revenue and we pass through so they can pay their contractual agreements. And I believe Prince is coming back on the 25th. No,
It might be the first.
might be the first,
They may have a conflict, so
so we don't know.
we're waiting to hear back.
Prince will return though at some point,
They will.
and we'll be there. All right. Please prepare an ordinance to appropriate and unappropriate balance in the 1201 street construction M&R funds, the following account, $15,000. This is for an intersection safety study. It looks like this is the area of 17th Street out to about 32nd Street on Lincoln Way West. We have had multiple complaints. Mr. Smee has done the job of championing for his ward, the concerns that people have out there. It looks like they put it out to bid, and we have some that has responded. They are going to do the study. Does anyone have questions of the city service director? I would be inclined to put this on the agenda for Monday to try to get it moving. Mr. Gray?
I just noticed it doesn't have emergency language or otherwise. Do we know if it's supposed to have emergency language?
No, it is not. Mr. Sneed, did you have a?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. So I just want to reiterate that in the future at Massillon, we can pretty much only go west. So we need to take into account the elementary school that's being built, the middle school on 29th intersection, and the Grosvenor turn lane. So this study should be able to provide quite a bit of answers to questions and complaints that I'm hearing routinely, that the administration is hearing routinely. So I'm asking everybody, if you have any questions, please bring them up. let me know. But I'm looking forward to move this as quickly as possible because this is going to be, if it goes through, I think it's going to be at least a few years in the making. This is a large project that is much needed, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple of old pieces. I would like to ask the law director, please come forward. He does have a request in front of us for a transfer. I'll let him go into more details. It was brought to us and we received first reading last week.
Good evening, Council, President Pro Tem. We are requesting that what has already been appropriated for the 2022 balance in our salary division be transferred. Our domestic violence prosecutor, who is one person, is Melinda Reed. She has over 2 decades of experience. However, she is on her own line item because our office historically has always paid her salary through a grant. The grant varies sometimes on how much we get. She hasn't, her salary has been increased smallly, or a small amount since our request for the grant. However, this is money that's already been appropriated to salaries. We have it extra in order to pay for the domestic violence grant that doesn't pay the gap where her salary is not paid. Just to give you a little bit of numbers behind this and why it's so important to have a dedicated domestic violence prosecutor. We do track those cases, menacing by stalking, domestic violence, and violating the protection order. Since 2020, in 2020, we had record numbers of those charges. In 2021, we unfortunately beat that record. That's a record that you don't want to break. As of August right now, we appear to be up from last year by about 10%, a little less than 10%. So those numbers are still increasing. We do have dedicated domestic violence advocates that work with her. They're actually on loan from the county, so the city of Massillon does not have to pay for that. And also the domestic violence project, we have 2, and all they want is an office. So we provide that for them, and we get their services as well.
Thank you for that prepared
I got pictures too. You want to see them?
Real quick question. What is the small incremental raise?
I'm sorry.
What is the small incremental raise that she has received?
I do not know what her raise was. I can tell you that when we were looking to hire folks, we did everything within the budget that we had, but we were not getting a criminal prosecutor outside of the domestic violence. So we had to offer our new, the person who's now hired, we had to historically give them hire for a rate, but this person actually had 6 years of felony experience. So we were able to increase that, but I can just tell you that I don't know the number to tell you what exactly she received.
Do you know, is the grant smaller this year than in the past? Did I hear you say something possible?
I actually think the grant may be higher this year than, and I again don't know. I believe I know that she wrote out here, she has to attend seminars, training, so a lot of her grant is based on the more things that she does. I know she joined the Stark County Collaborative Board for Domestic Violence as well. So it's kind of like if you check those boxes, then you get more rewarded. So I believe her award is at least much or a little bit more than what she's received. However, her pay was not consistent with, she was not on, like say a 21S or 22S. For whatever reason, prior to my coming here, she was being paid at a rate that is not consistent with anything that council's ever passed. It was this rogue number. I looked at it. I put her. I righted that. Put her exactly where she should be with over 20 years experience, and she is exactly where she's supposed to be. And we need this transfer. Like I said, it's just an internal transfer because I've done enough to be able in the other areas for salary to be able to appropriate this so we can continue functioning.
So with the increase of cases and the correcting a road classification, essentially, there's a slight increase, and that's understandable. Do you anticipate then that, I know historically, this salary has been completely covered by the grant, but moving to subsidize in our annual budgets?
Not as, it's my wish that it's certainly here, it's less than $5,000. I would like it to be even less than that. We're currently hiring a new chief counsel, which may also allow us to play with salaries. And based on that person's experience, we haven't hired one yet. Based on their experience, what they're deserved, we might be able to reconcile that. So there's no, certainly the last thing I like to do is asking the council for money. So if I can figure it all out and remain net zero, you better believe I'm going to try. And I have one additional comment too.
Okay, go ahead.
It has nothing to do with money. As far as, because all of you know, the county seat or the municipal court seat takes care of 11 different jurisdictions, so not only Massillon Police Department, but all the crimes that happen in those 10 other jurisdictions my office deals with. I can tell you that storage space rental places, unfortunately, are victims of crime more often than other commercial businesses. They also, there's been, I hate using this word because it gets used too much, but there has been an increase or an epidemic of catalytic converters being stolen. A lot of times you'll have these larger trucks that have these larger catalytic converters at these types of places. They're getting stolen, the units are being broken into, and they're also great places for a person that's receiving stolen property to hide all their goods. So we've, and I got Detective Sleuth's on his head here, so you can just take that in consideration from my perspective.
Right. Regarding domestic violence and not storage units at this time, does anyone have any questions? Not necessarily about domestic violence, but about the appropriation for Attorney Richard. Ms. Kramer.
Is this individual full-time or
Yes.
part-time?
She is our longest serving prosecutor.
And our increase, is that seen in Kansas City? Is that seen in Jackson Township? Or is it just Massillon seeing approximately 10% increase in domestic violence?
It's all over, and I kind of almost misinterpreted your question, but I can tell you her equivalent at the county or other places, other municipal places, she's paid about $25,000 less here than what she would make there. So not only are we getting a great person with a steel that's dealing with this increase, but yes, the increase is in Massillon, but I would say in all areas are contributing to that increase.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Attorney Richard.
Thank you.
The only other piece we have before us is the request to repeal the legislation for the appropriation related to the remodeling of the guest building. Any members of the Finance Committee have any additional questions or comments? It will come up, I believe. Is it the next one?
Yes.
We'll come up to the next one for a committee or a council vote for second reading.
Yeah, I do have general questions. So if we repeal this block grant, that money's going to be returned to the grantee, correct? Grantor.
We would have until the end of August of next year, I believe, so approximately 12 months to find a new project and reallocate those dollars. The problem is that part of those, that $250,000 was part of COVID, so it has more stringent guidelines than the typical grant dollars that we've received, so you cannot just put it out in the community like you normally would. Additionally, we've already spent $40,000 on this project, so if we remove the grant, the city would still have to pay for that $40,000 and have no benefit. Just be $40,000 that's thrown away.
So along those same lines, if we don't repeal, does the project move forward?
Correct.
As in what form?
It would just continue to move forward. Right now, the mayor has full authorization to move forward and receive bids. She's already, I believe, already put it out to bid. It's already been put out to bid. They're already going to start receiving. She has all authorization to move forward with this project as is.
Based on the plans drawn by architect John Clark.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, this will go up for vote on Monday to see if it gets second. That is all we have tonight. Oh, Mr. Gray.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis, I did have one other thing. It's not really pertaining to my committee. I'm not sure what committee it might pertain to, but it was something I wanted to bring before council for discussion. We had a few weeks ago, one of the residents of my ward came forward talking about the fireworks ordinance, and, state of Ohio passed a law that allows personal fireworks at certain times and certain days. And she came forward asking consideration to have, for Massillon to have their own law to override that, to not allow any personal fireworks, to only allow the professional displays on the days and times that they choose. I discussed this with the law department as far as getting legislation worded for this. They asked me to see what the feeling was on council to see, is this something that we would even want to take up? Because there is law in place and the state law is in place. What would be happening is this, if we chose, the city would be opting out of that law. There are other, and the reason that the law department asked me to get a consensus or a feeling towards this is because there's a lot of checking we would have to do in regard to the law and how our law would be working and so forth. So there's a fair amount of work to do if we choose to move forward. So I wanted to see if anybody had discussion on whether or not that would be something they would like to entertain. Mr. Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I know there are other communities that have outlawed fireworks or put tighter restrictions in their communities for fireworks. I also have to say, around this beginning Memorial Day and all the way through Labor Day, all I hear are fireworks complaints. But that's because all I hear are fireworks too. It just doesn't seem to be restricted to the holidays. Once it starts, it doesn't seem to stop until the weather gets bad. And there are a lot of people who are dealing with issues. There was a house that caught fire by a bottle rocket a couple of years ago. A lady cites that on Facebook all the time as one of her reasons for not liking the fireworks. So I think it is something we might, look at, maybe considering. Doesn't necessarily have to outlaw them, but maybe put a little bit tighter restrictions on them.
Thank you.
Can we get copies or see what the current legislation is that the state of Ohio passed before we go making changes or adjusting? Because if it's only for certain days and you're hearing fireworks, then basically those people are breaking the law anyhow. Well, we don't have to. I mean, we take on liability when we make our own rules. And I know like with dogs and it all gets upset and it's like, well, what do you consider fireworks? I mean, so you could be getting into a lot of details. Like someone could have sparklers and some buckles and it's really not going to do anything, but it's going to make noise and upset their neighbor or dog. There's all, but as far as certain size fireworks are the ones that go up, I mean, we have houses in Massillon, that were built before, strict zoning that are right on top of each other. I mean, so I think, Jim, as a fireman, there's a huge safety risk, right in the core of the city. As you get out, maybe not so much because the houses are farther apart. But if the existing legislation is only allowing it on certain days and only allowing certain things, it sounds like it'd be more like a matter of enforcement, and we really don't have to see whether it's really an issue of enforcement or it should be a clause. And then if we change it, I mean, I'm sure it's a huge, bill that became law. I mean, as far as details, and a lot of those details, if they're enforced, might be what people just want to make them happy.
Mr. Hurricane?
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I agree with Mrs. Hardwick-Smith. I guess I would question our ability to enforce, the issues that currently are, because I hear a lot of them too. My dog hates it. I don't like it either. But if we go even more stringent, I mean, I'm not sure we're equipped to handle complaints on those issues that we currently have. So if it's more stringent or outside the time, I mean, that might be a question for the safety service director or someone regarding that, but something to think about.
Mr. Rich, I see you approaching. I assume you'd like to speak.
May I be invited?
Please.
I can tell you that we have a Massillon ordinance 1519.04B, which is a little more restrictive than what recently was put into place. But essentially what has been described here This is the new law as it stands. It does restrict it to days. It says that only from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. on the following days, July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then the weekend if it were to fall into the weekend. Labor Day weekend, Monday, Saturday, and Sunday. Diwali, New Year's Eve from 4 to 11:59. New Year's Day from 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. Chinese New Year, Cinco de Mayo, Memorial Day weekend on certain times, and Juneteenth. So other than that, I think it goes to Councilwoman Harwood Smith that this is the law, so that if we're talking about fireworks being set off any other time, then it's about enforcement of the law, not changing the law. Thank you.
Mr. Richard, that was an Ohio law you just read?
I did. That's the new one that went in effect this year.
Thank you. And along those lines, I'd like to make a point that if we enact our own law, well, it sounds like we already have one, but if our police department chose to enforce it, they wouldn't be citing under our law because it costs the city money to do that. So even if we had a law, they'd probably be citing, and they enforce the state law, they'd be citing under the state law, the Ohio Revised Code. So, I mean, I agree. I don't like hearing the fireworks all of the time, late at night. It does upset my dogs as well. But I got to think about what's enforceable, what would be enforced, and is the law already there? And should that be the law that's enforced versus something we would have to enact on our own? Any other discussion?
I would just want to point out also that if we further discussion, this would probably fall under health and welfare.
That's what I was debating as to what committee.
Yeah, I would assume this would be health and welfare. It would be enforcement. It's not police and fire, it's not rules and courts. So typically this would fall under Mr. Smith's committee.
So bottom line is we have a state law in place. We also have a city law apparently that's a little bit more restrictive in place. I think it comes down to enforcement. Mr. Sneed.
Thank you. I also agree it comes down to enforcement. However, there is an economic factor as well because we do have a place that sells fireworks in the city of Massillon, or right outside the city of Massillon. So not to impact their business as well, but I just want to point that out.
Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. From the standpoint of a former policeman or policeman over there, firefighter, paramedic over here, if they were done safely, obviously there's hardly ever a problem. The problem is, they're not always. In fact, they even push it towards selling. And some of the participants may be of different capacities or incapacitated by other things during those times, which again increases the chances for injuries. Again, I don't think it's in our best interest to even try to make it more strict because it won't be enforceable. And it goes back to the whole thing, you can't legislate morality or intelligence. So we can enforce what we can, and hopefully the innocent don't get hurt, which is unfortunately what usually does happen. In my neighborhood, our neighborhood, there's some folks there that I don't know how they can afford it because they spend thousands and thousands of dollars. It goes on for a long time. Impressive, but also disruptive. But if they're doing it during the allowable times, I don't know that some of those can be legal. I thought there was much more restrictions than there is, but yeah, you're right though. The proximity of the other buildings and the conditions around them are seldom yielded. And regardless, we're going to be paying the price over the whole time. I just want to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, I will sign.